this Tuesday afternoon, late Tuesday, and a somber Tuesday because we've just received breaking news that the captain Willis Reed, longtime captain of the New York Knicks, two-time NBA champion with the New York Knicks, among many accolades, has passed away today at the age of 80. The captain has passed away. CP the franchise here, and special guest with me today. He's been a previous guest on this show to talk about his book, Memoirs of a Knicks Fan, because he, as a young kid, lived to see those glory days of those 70s championship teams that was spearheaded by one number 19 Willis Reed, and I'm wearing my 19 jersey today. But that is Fred Cantor. Fred, how you doing today?
Well, ordinarily I would have said good, but when I got the news from you, it took a bit out of me. Willis, as you know, is one of the iconic athletes from my youth and one of my two all-time favorite Knicks, along with Clyde. And I realized living to 80 is a good run. I just figured he'd be one of those guys to live to be 100 because he was such a bull and he was always doing stuff outdoors. And I do remember seeing the video of him at the 50th anniversary of the 73 celebration. And he did look gaunt, so I assumed something was not 100% right with him. But still, to get the news that one of your all-time favorites, is gone, it's a blow.
Two-time NBA champion with the Knicks, two-time Finals MVP, the MVP of the NBA in 1970, and also a member of both the 50th anniversary team and the 75th anniversary team. What were some of your earliest memories of Willis when you used to attend games at the Garden?
Well, Willis was drafted in 64, and his rookie year was 64-65. And what a lot of people do not remember is that Willis wasn't even a first-round draft pick by the Knicks. He was being strongly considered by them, but they took Jim Bad News Barnes. And the Knicks grabbed him with the first pick of the second round, and obviously there were far fewer teams. So, Red Auerbach was rightfully considered someone who was a great assessor of talent, but believe it or not, he selected Mel Counts right before Willis. And think of how Knicks history would have been different if Red Auerbach had selected Willis Reed with the Celtics' first pick. Any case, Willis made an impression right away. There weren't as many games to watch on TV back then, but I would see some of them, listen on radio and also read about the team in the New York Times. And he made an impression right away because he was putting up some great stats. And, and he did get Rookie of the Year. And I got to see him for the first time Christmas vacation, 65-66 year. And I jokingly refer to it as the first Here Comes Willis game. And that's because Willis didn't show up until the beginning of the second quarter. He got stuck in traffic, holiday traffic. He was living in Queens, and I guess he wasn't used to what holiday traffic was at that time. So he didn't show up. But in any case, Willis instantly became one of my favorites, even though I was a guard, and obviously I couldn't emulate him because he was a guy who just had a tremendous skill set. He had quickness, he had strength, he had agility. He had great moves around the basket, and he also had a feathery jumper. And he helped set the tone for what the Knicks would become because back in those days, basically the goal was to have a center who, was big and basically operated near the basket. And when the Knicks made that fantastic trade for Dave DeBusschere in December of 68, it enabled Willis to go back to his position at center. And the Knicks all of a sudden had five guys who could shoot from the outside and Willis could go inside or outside, and he was incredibly mobile. And I've long felt that they were the prototype for what the NBA became, many years later.
Yeah.
And one thing for sure, I just want to add,
Yeah, go ahead.
when you went to see Willis play, you never saw him take plays off. I mean, he went. I mean, if you saw Patrick Ewing, he also was constantly working both ends of the court, and Willis was like that. You got your money's worth every time you saw him play.
Yeah, no question about it. And you mentioned, his prowess that would be akin today to the modern NBA big, right? Being able to step out, knock down a mid-range jumper, but also having a tango with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lou Alcindor at the time with the Bucks, and Wilt Chamberlain with the Lakers, Wes Unseld. Willis was very versatile, man. What did you remember about those battles with some of those titans of the game?
Especially Wilt, and then he was originally known as Lou Alcindor, before he changed to Kareem. Obviously, Willis gave away a lot in the way of height, but he battled them evenly, even got the better of them sometimes because he had tremendous strength to keep them away from the basket, and he had his own incredible moves around the basket. And the thing is, for those who didn't see Willis in his prime, and when I say his prime, he really started suffering major knee problems, and that led to a succession of injuries in the middle of that first championship season. You got to remember, the Knicks started out that year 23-1, and they were dominating everybody, and they matched up well against even the best teams. And again, that was because of the versatility of the team, including, and led by Willis. And make no mistake, Willis was the best player at that time. And, in the latter part of that season, he started developing those knee problems, for the games in the playoffs before the infamous injury when he went down in Game 5 against the Lakers of the finals. He was already suffering some knee problems and getting some cortisone shots. And so there'd be one game, and this is, I'm not making up the statistic. He had 36 points and 36 rebounds against the Bullets in one of the playoff games. But there were other games where he wouldn't be as effective because all of a sudden, he was becoming more erratic due to these injuries. And it's long been my contention that if Willis had the health of, say, Bill Russell, who, yes, he had a sprained ankle in the finals, early in his career, but otherwise he remained, relatively healthy, as did many players that era. But Willis really started to go downhill at the age of 27. If he had been able to maintain just normal health of an NBA player that era, I believe the Knicks could have run off maybe 6 titles in a row. And Willis would be remembered, now he's remembered largely for that iconic moment coming out of the tunnel and hobbling and going into Game 7, which was a great moment, don't get me wrong. But I think Willis would have been remembered as the anchor of perhaps the greatest dynasty in NBA. Well, obviously the Celtics were great before that, but I'm saying the second greatest dynasty in NBA history, because the Knicks could have been running off a series of titles and against probably more challenging competition than the Celtics faced.
Yeah, and you mentioned him going down in coming back in 7, but he went down in 5. Where were you at that moment, and did you feel like the series was going to swing to the Lakers' favor once he went down?
Well, again, back in those days, in 1970, the Knicks home games, I'm talking about even the NBA Finals, really weren't on local television or national television. The way you followed it, there was cable TV, but it was very limited in Manhattan at that time. But I was up in Connecticut, and basically most of us followed the games by listening to Marv on radio. And I'm talking about even the NBA Finals. And it sounded, and I remember to this day, I was listening in my bedroom. My father walked in because he was, listening in another part of the house. And he said, you might as well turn it off. they're not going to come back. It's over. But I knew as a fan, and I was 16 at the time, and I was in high school. I know, on occasion there are miraculous comebacks, and I figured I'm not giving up now. I'm not turning off, and that turned out to be that Game 5, the most memorable experience I've had as a sports fan. Anything that I witnessed live, whether radio, TV, being there in person, because the Knicks staged this incredible comeback, and that was spearheaded by Clyde, although it was unquestionably a team effort. But yeah, I mean, and then for Game 7, all we were hoping is that, just come out, maybe show your presence, maybe to hold off Wilt. And as we all know, he came out and hit those first 2 shots from the floor, and the rest was history. But Willis, again, I think for those who didn't live through that era, there's not enough footage of how good he was. And I can't really compare him to anyone today other than to tell you that he was just something that in the combination of skills and quickness and strength and his outside touch and inside moves, it was something I don't think we'd really seen before.
No question about it. And we are remembering Willis Reed. Salute to everyone in the chat that is joining us. This is a special edition, breaking news edition of Knicks Fan TV. CP the Franchise here, joined with my special guest, Fred Cantor, author of Memoirs of a Knicks Fan, where he recounts his memories of watching these Knicks in the 60s and 70s, spearheaded by the captain, Willis Reed, man. Number 19 has passed away today at the age of 18. 2-time NBA champion with the Knicks. 2 times NBA Finals MVP, 1970-1973. The NBA's most valuable player in 1970. 7-time All-Star. 1970 All-Star MVP. All-NBA first team in 1970. 4-time All-NBA second team. NBA All-Defensive Team in 1970. The NBA Rookie of the Year in 65. Also a member of the All-Rookie Team. And twice made the anniversary teams of the 50th NBA season and 75th. His number's also retired. The number 19 retired at MSG, man. Definitely a sad day. Because when I went to the game that was celebrating the 73 team, he wasn't, I don't believe he was there.
No, he did right. They showed, or at least watching on TV, they showed a video of him, and he did look gaunt. I said to my wife, I said, "Oh my gosh, what's happened to Willis?" Because he just did not look that good. So, when you let me know the news today, I was not shocked. Like I said, I figured he'd live to 100, but he didn't look great then. But again, for the fans of that era, and it was like watching, Patrick, that for those from the 90s, remember the 90s, I mean, you would see the work ethic every single game. And that's what you always got from Willis. And even after he had the injury problems, you would always see the effort, even when physically he wasn't 100%. And, he was named, yes, it's factually accurate. He was named MVP of the 73 championship team. But the fact of the matter is that team had unbelievable balance. There was no one player who really deserved to be MVP. And if you look at the finals, when they beat LA 4-1, there was a different leading scorer in each of those Knicks victories.
And that was the 1973 championship, right?
Right. So, right. I'm talking about 73.
Okay.
In the Knicks' first victory, that it was a dollar bill. I saw Game 3 of the finals. Willis led the team in scoring. Dave DeBuscher led the team in scoring in their third victory of the series. And in the closeout, it was Earl the Pearl. So 4 different guys, and none of those guys led the team in scoring in the regular season. And that, of course, was Clyde. And by the way, he was not injured in the finals. It's just that they had such tremendous balance at that time. And I'm not sure there's any NBA team ever that replicated the pure balance that team had. And its unselfish play, and the fact that any one of those 5 guys could have been called upon to take the last shot, could have been called to take upon the last shot from the outside. And was a paradigm for other teams to shoot for. I'm not saying we're ever going to see it with the current group of Knicks, whom I love, by the way. Yeah. And I think the foundation is being put in place for that run to a future title. But I think in terms of the unselfishness, to make that extra pass to find the open man, that's something that any team from any era could learn from.
Yeah, no question about it. The selflessness of that team is something that, when I speak to, we call the guys like you the OGs who've seen all of the great Knick moments. And when I talk to those guys from that generation, they all say the same thing. The way that they played team ball, the way that they were selfless, the way that they played for each other. One guy had it. It could be one different guy each night, whether it was Clyde, the Bush, as you said, Reed. Maybe it's Bradley's night. Maybe it's Barnett's night, the other. And so that's incredible. And then, what's also admirable about that team is that the times that they were living in to come together as a team. You had so much going on, so much polarization politically, along racial lines, everything that was going on. Vietnam War, the assassination of King, and so many leaders. For them to come together, you had a hodgepodge group of characters. So for them to come together in this melting pot of New York and win the championship, it's beautiful.
And they were kind of and Bill Bradley's talked about this and others, they were kind of a model of the ideal world we would like to see. Because, you had black and white, you had people from rural areas, urban areas, people from different parts of the country. And these guys came together as a team on the floor. And, also they seemed to genuinely like each other. And I think we've seen that reflected over the years. And so they were a true team, in every sense of the word.
Yeah, no question about it, Fred. And, for Willis, as you said, he came in the late second round, coming out of Grambling, a small school, coming out of, rural Louisiana, segregated South. That's what the mental fortitude that these guys came in with. I mean, to go through what they're going through in life and then to still accomplish what they're able to accomplish at the biggest stage. That's just an incredible testament to his character. No question about it.
Absolutely. The players, especially like Willis, who came from the Deep South, look, obviously there's still racism today, and there's still strides that we have to make as a nation. But what people like Willis had to face in the Deep South back then was, even on another level. Yeah. There's no question about that.
Absolutely, man. And I'm looking at a couple of the artifacts that you sent me that you have. A couple of these pictures of Willis. One is of Willis. I think this is the MVP, the one that says ultimate goal. Is that his MVP trophy?
I think that's they're holding the championship trophy.
The championship trophy.
I think that was the Walter Brown championship trophy, which is what it was known as back then. It was a different type of trophy. He's standing there, I think, with Red and I can't remember who else, but the ultimate goal, was the championship trophy for the given to the winners of the NBA title.
Nice. So was this like an insert from a magazine that you had, or where did you pull this from?
So I sent you some things that came from the one of them was, or a couple might have been from the 1973-74 media guide or yearbook, which had pictures from the championship season. And others were from the playoff program that I had from the 1973 finals, which were pictures taken from that year or the previous year. And one of them, I think you have is a picture from Willis Reed's basketball camp, because back then the players did not make the enormous amounts of money that they do today. So players would actually work in the summers, and some ran their own basketball camps. And Willis had a camp. Dean the Dream had a camp. Clyde, I think, was executive director at the Kutcher Sports Academy. That's the type of thing they did. And I had a friend who was at Willis Reed's camp, and he said Willis was great, great with kids.
Yeah, tremendous. Tremendous. A lot of people have shared that sentiment in terms of his, just being a selfless guy, and he will be daily missed. Willis Reed passes away at the age of 80. Salute to Knicks Nation, man. Salute to everybody in the chat. Let's throw a number 19 in the chat to remember the captain, Willis Reed. CP the Franchise here, joined by my friend and special guest, Fred Cantor. Fred wrote the book Memoirs of a Knicks Fan, documenting his time growing up in those days, those days of the early glory days of the Knicks, the 70s teams, and back in the 60s as well. And Fred, you always talked about the rivalry that the Knicks had with the Celtics back in those 60s. What was that, the Willis-Russell battle? What was that like for you?
Well, Willis actually, he did more than hold his own against Russell, because Willis, again, had this tremendous quickness. And you can look at some of his stat lines against Russell in the playoffs, and he did quite well. Now, admittedly, Russell was a bit older at that point, but not that past his prime. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, we hated the Celtics because, when I was growing up, the Knicks didn't even have a winning record. Their first winning season didn't happen until I was in ninth grade. And of course, the Celtics were winning all those titles. And there was a period covering a 2-year period when you played a lot more games. The Celtics beat the Knicks, I think it was 21 consecutive times in a 2-year period. So that was rough. But the worst part, and one of the reasons we really detested the Celtics, their coach, Red Auerbach, had this habit. It was lighting up, a victory cigar towards the end of the game. I mean, talk about rubbing it in. So that's something we totally detested. And I mean, the way you see guys, gathering handshakes, exchanging smiles after games. And I'm not criticizing that, but I'm saying that never happened at that point. In fact, there were a couple of times where you thought teams were about to break out into a fight after a game. So, I think we're all shaped by those teams, those rivalries from our childhood. So the Celtics have been a team I've always, despised. And, I've loved what the Knicks have done against the Celtics this year in particular. And what I wanted to say is, I had the opportunity to, feel blessed as a fan that I got to witness the foundation in place and the rise and development of young players, and then integrating players through trades, the building up towards a championship. And I do feel we're in the, I don't want to say the early stages, but we're in the stages now of having that happen. I was there for that golden era. I had Knicks season tickets from 87, 88 to 99, 2000, which was the second golden era, even though they didn't win it all, but, they were in contention many years and made it to 2 finals. I do feel right now we are in, the early part of another golden era. I have so much faith and confidence in where they're going. And Jalen Brunson, he's a guy who he might ultimately make it to my Knicks Mount Rushmore.
Who's in your Mount Rushmore right now?
So my Mount Rushmore naturally is Willis, Clyde. They're my 2 all-time favorites, Patrick, and my 4th. And I'm just talking about greatness, no matter what the period of time. Okay. My 4th is Bernard. Okay. Now look, obviously I love the Pearl, DeBusschere, and there are others. But I'm talking about, remember, Bernard led the league in scoring. And, even Red Holtzman said he was, the greatest scoring machine you'd ever seen. And again, this is another potentially all-time great in the NBA who was cut down in his prime because he was 28 when he went down with that horrendous knee injury and then was gone. I mean, but before that, Bernard was just unstoppable. And, but I'm here to tell you, I don't live in the past. I'm enjoying the present. I'm enjoying what we're seeing. Jalen Brunson is a special player that I hope. And by the way, I'm not knocking Julius. Yeah. Julius is a tremendous player too. Mm-hmm. My 95-year-old mom, soon to be 96, would like him to work on his anger management issues. But Julius is a tremendous player. But I'm talking about Jalen Brunson is to me something even more special in a way, because he doesn't have the physical skills or attributes that Julius has. And it's amazing what he gets accomplished. And, his basketball IQ, all of that. I'm telling you, Jalen Brunson, might ultimately make my Knicks Mount Rushmore. And seeing him there, it gives me the confidence that the Knicks are well on their way. Plus the way Julius has been playing and others. And for those who think the Knicks are far away from an NBA title, I'm not saying they're going to be, making the NBA Finals this year, but my attitude is there is no all-time great Golden State Warrior team this year. They weren't a great team last. I'm talking about the team that won the 3 and 4 years or whatever. The great Lakers teams or the Celtics teams from the past or the San Antonio Spurs. There's no one right now in the NBA, in my opinion, that matches that level of talent. And I think, in part because of that, the Knicks, could be in the mix easily in the coming years. And, do they need one more piece who could help? I think so. But if you look at the development of their younger players, and by the way, speaking of unselfish play that the Knicks had in the 70s, I'm not trying to be overly critical of the current group. I love them overall, but I'm telling you, if Quentin Grimes played on the 73 Knicks, there's no way he's only getting one shot in a game. I'm just saying the guys would make sure that he would get the ball a little bit more for, when he's waiting there. So, and again, I think Tibbs overall has done a great job, but, there are just some things that maybe you can learn from watching the championship Knicks about getting some guys more shots. That's all.
Yeah, well, if you think about the Holtzman tree, right? Who learned under him? Phil Jackson, right? Who's learning under Phil Jackson, but a Steve Kerr. You kind of look at that Warriors offense. A lot of people liking that Warriors offense to what the Knicks were doing back in those days, of being selfless and moving the ball, moving yourselves. And yeah, if we could get Quentin Grimes a couple more opportunities, that might help this offense, and no question about it. And once again, salute to Knicks Nation. We are remembering the legend, Hall of Famer, Knicks legend, arguably the greatest Knick of all time, man, depending on who you ask. Arguably the greatest Knick of all time in Willis Reed. And here was this was a clip from Willis's retirement ceremony at Madison Square Garden. Here's what he had to say.
And I'd like to say it's been my pleasure. New York Knicks have meant a lot to me in my life, and thank you very much for being so real. Thank you.
Thank you, Willis. Let's give him
By the
a
way,
Madison
I was
Square
there
Garden
for his
send-off.
Go ahead, Fred. Go ahead.
I was there for his retirement ceremony.
Okay.
And I wrote about this in the book, and to kind of illustrate how times have changed, it was not a sellout crowd for that game. In fact, and I got down on the floor to take some pictures because I'm an amateur photography buff. And I immediately saw the empty sections of seats, up in the blues, even some in the greens. And I think the attendance that night was only 13,000 and change. Now, yes, it was the World Series. I think it was Game 4. The Yankees were playing the Reds, their first World Series in 12 years. But come on, the New York City isn't big enough to support, watching a World Series on TV and fans coming out to salute Willis Reed on his night. And it's something I just really felt empathy for him that night, because I'm looking up at some of the empty sections, and I'm thinking he's seeing the same thing. And this guy, he just gave up his body for this team. And I just cannot. And by the way, I don't think that would have ever happened today. I believe there would be a sellout crowd if a comparable situation happened.
Yeah, no question about it, man. And here were some of Clyde's sentiments on the captain. This was from the Knicks 50th anniversary, the 73 team 50th anniversary celebration just a couple weeks ago at Madison Square Garden.
That we would say, not in our house, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, not in our house, Kareem and Oscar Robinson. We are the New York Knicks.
All right, that was Clyde, and Clyde said he idolized Willis. He idolized the captain. So, as time passes and we're losing so many of our legends, we got to make sure that we give these guys their flowers. Clyde and Barnett and Bradley and these guys and Lucas and these guys that are surviving, because that's the legacy of the Knicks. That's the history of the Knicks. The only 2 championship teams.
By the way, if you had told me back in 1973, so I was a college sophomore, was 19 years old, and I had tickets for the playoffs that year. And as I said, one of the games I saw, thankfully, was Game 3 of the finals that they beat LA 87-83 to go ahead 2-1. And I wrote about this in the book too. If you told me back then in 1973 that decades down the road, there was going to be this tiny device that I could hold in my hand, that all of a sudden I could watch soccer games live on from Europe, or that I could, go through and research anything under the sun and find historical documents, and then they'll show up right on that screen. Obviously that would have blown me away, something beyond anyone's wildest dreams. But then I would have thought, okay, technology, so many advances are made over the years, that all that's possible. But at the same time, if you told me in 1973 that I had just seen my last Knicks championship until I was approaching 70 years old, that's the thing that would have seemed unbelievable. Because how could that happen with the talent they still had, and going forward, figuring, there are more titles to come. How could this be? So, look, I know I'm fortunate that I got to witness that special time. But it's mind-boggling to me, given, New York's center as a basketball, in the center of the basketball world, that and always how attractive or appealing Madison Square Garden is to visiting players, that there was never another title. But again, I remain hopeful with this current group. I'm hopeful that the team is on its way. And CP, I know you've witnessed titles. You're a big Giants fan.
Yes.
So
yes.
And you root for the Yankees. Am I
correct? Yep.
So you've seen that, but I'm telling you, it's going to be different when that parade happens for the Knicks. And it will happen.
It'll happen, man. And whether I'm running the show or my son's running the show, hopefully I'm there to witness it, somehow, some way, man.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought a little bit of humor to this.
Yeah. But hey, hopefully the Brunson is a start or something. You gotta hope.
But and that's why I do wonder whether I have more patience, because I've been to the promised land as a fan, and I'm willing to put up with more perhaps. But and that's why when people earlier in the year they started calling for Tibbs' head when they had that slow start, or some other times people are upset with one particular player, they want RJ to go immediately. You got to look at the long term, think of the big picture. And I know the fans who are younger are frustrated never having that title, but sometimes it's a bit of luck, but you just have to let the ingredients come together.
Got it.
And like I say, I think that's happening in place right now. And notwithstanding that difficult loss last night, I'm still cautiously optimistic about where the future is for this team. And I say that, I was listening to one of the radio shows where one of the hosts was saying, oh, if the Knicks get wiped out, well, not get wiped, but he said if they lose in the first round of Cleveland, the season's a total failure.
I
don't feel that way.
No,
I don't feel that way at all.
Yeah.
You have to look at the progress they're making as a team and the progress that individuals are making. And again, that's the way we were looking at it back in the 60s.
Yeah.
It didn't happen overnight. And that's why, and by the way, I'm not saying there's any player on this team who's the equivalent of Willis Reed. I'm not even saying there's someone who's the equivalent of what Clyde was. But you don't necessarily need that to win a title, especially not now. So again, I remain hopeful. about the future. And it's too bad Willis won't be around to see that, because I know he would have embraced that, because he was, someone so devoted to the Knicks. And, but, like I say, I remain hopeful.
True indeed, man. Well said, Fred. And I think, it's a great point to end on for the fans. Be patient. Be patient. Let this thing marinate. And it's very hard to do, Fred, in this instant gratification type of world that we live in. I'm certainly guilty of it, especially going through what we've seen in the 90s and coming close. And, well, like you said, you've seen it. So maybe you do have a little bit more patience in that regard. But, Fred,
Can I add one just last point about,
go ahead.
One of Willis's peers?
Yeah.
Because one thing that I think is bad today is that we have a tendency to judge people by championships. And Patrick Ewing, to me, is no less of a champion than Willis, because he was someone who was a tremendous player, who gave his all, and was one of the premier players in the league. But he didn't have Clyde and the Pearl in the backcourt. And I think, that's something we all have to keep in mind, especially as we think about Patrick versus, say, Willis Reed, that you can't let championships define everything. That is the ultimate goal, but it is a team sport, and you need the right players to come together. And, and Willis obviously was the key guy on the 69-70 championship team, but he had receded somewhat, and it was really a bunch of players coming together for 73 championship. And, that's what I'm looking forward to the future, and what I think is going to happen with this group of Knicks.
Well said. Well said, man. Couldn't agree more. Wish we did have some more time here, Fred, but I definitely appreciate all the time. You jumped on here on a whim. As soon as I heard the news, you and Chuck D were the two people who I thought of. I did speak to Chuck before we got on the air. He wanted to come on, but he's actually en route to Miami, and he'll be at the Knicks versus Heat game tomorrow. But he gave me his thoughts and also shared some sketches that he had of the Captain Willis Reed on Twitter. So if you guys are on Twitter, make sure you guys check that out at Mr. Chuck D. And also check out Fred's book, man, Memoirs of a Knicks Fan. I have my copy here. It's a great read.
The title is Fred from Fresh Meadows.
Fred from Fresh Meadows, Memoirs of a Knicks Fan. So make sure you guys check that out.
And I'm glad you didn't ask for any artistic drawings from me. I know how talented Chuck D is, because I'm the only kid who got an F for my diorama at Coleytown Elementary School. So.
Oh man, all good, Fred. But like I said, man, thanks again for sharing so many memories and insights on Willis, especially for the generation that never got to see him play. Because, like you said, you had to be there to really understand the greatness of Willis Reed. So I'm honored to have you on to share those thoughts. Because
well, thank you again for having me.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And for those of you guys in the chat, thanks again for joining us. I got to jump over to Bleacher Report at 4 o'clock for a Knicks fan Q&A. So if you guys want to follow me over to Bleacher Report, go ahead and do that. And then we'll be back tomorrow, regularly scheduled program, Knicks versus Heat play-by-play and post-game live. Thanks again for everyone who's tuning in. We send our condolences to the Reed family, his friends, his teammates, and all those who mourn today. This has been a special edition of Knicks Fan TV. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us.